everyone, welcome to Wildwood Studio. I'm Sarah, and in this video, I'm going to be doing a wood burning of a horse. Before I start talking about what I'm doing, I do want to say a quick thanks to everyone who has subscribed. We just passed 100 people in December, and now we're already at 150, which is, I know, a rather small milestone in comparison to a lot of creators on YouTube with like 4 million people watching, but I'm still pretty happy about it, so thanks. Okay, enough of that. On to the actual artwork. So I started this one by doing the eye and part of the jaw. Since the eyes are usually my favorite part of a burning, I feel like it really helps to bring it to life right at the beginning, which is something I think I've said before in previous videos. Then I moved on to the background because this burning is 12 by 16 inches, which is on the larger side compared to the size that I usually do for wood burnings, and I knew the background would take a while since in order to get dark tones like that you have to turn the heat up and burn pretty slowly, so I just kind of wanted to get it out of the way right at the beginning. Something a little different that I'm doing here is instead of smooth strokes, I did the whole thing with small circular motions to give it a different sort of texture. I've done this before on some of my boxes, which you can see if you check out my Facebook page, but never in the background of a realistic image like this, and I thought the texture would make it more interesting in the end. Also, I didn't burn all the way up to the edge of the horse at this point because I didn't want to create a hard outline, so leaving a little space allowed me to go back in and feather the edges later. If I had already finished the horse and I was doing the background at the end, I would have just gone ahead and done that now, but because I'm doing the background first, I wanted to be really careful to make sure that it didn't look like the background was sitting in front of the image. So that was about 2.5 hours on just the background and that little bit of the face that I did at the beginning. Next I did some shading on the rest of the face. I started each area I was working on by putting in some flat tones and then adding in the texture after. I find when working on something bigger like this, I end up working at a higher temperature when I'm doing larger sections, like with the neck in this case, because I'm able to move the pen faster and still maintain consistent color. Whereas with smaller areas, I use a lower temperature because it requires a bit more precision, so I do slower strokes with my burner. And that means that because the burner is in contact with the wood for longer, you have to compensate by turning the temperature down. Even so, I always prefer to err on the side of making something too light rather than too dark. While I was working on the face, I also kept stopping to erase the pencil lines, as you can probably see. A lot of these lines were areas where I sketched in where some of the darker shadows would be, and because this is a lighter section, I even ended up having to sand some of the darker pencil lines so that they wouldn't show up in the end. One thing that I find is very specific to burning is that the pen can cool down as you're working and as the heat is transferred from it to the wood, so when I stop burning to erase, I usually burn my first line afterwards, starting in a darker area because the pen can be a little hotter than you expect right at the beginning of that first line, and I don't want to cause unintentional dark spots, which I have done in the past, and I really didn't want that right in the middle of my horse's face. Another thing that I noticed I had to do a lot in this burning was stopping to scrape the built-up black soot off of the pen. This is probably because I had such a large dark background, but it's necessary to do anyways because leaving that buildup on there can make it harder to burn and can even leave some dark charcoal looking marks on other parts of the burning if I move from a dark spot to a light one. once I was done with the face, I wanted to work on some of the mane in that area as well, because it really frames the face, and also because I was a bit intimidated by having to shade the big open space of the neck. The nice thing with doing wood burnings of animals is that they very rarely need to look like they're perfectly smooth. So for example, with the horse's neck, it's a relatively large smooth area, but because the horse has fur, if I create a bit of a texture while shading it, it doesn't really matter as long as my pen strokes go in the right direction. This is part of the reason I feel much more comfortable burning pictures of animals than people. I can do people, I've done people before, but I find it's much more forgiving when you can hide any mistakes you make in the animal's fur. Whereas with people, a lot of the skin has to look completely smooth for the most part. So the last thing I did was the horse's mane, which took a long time because I didn't want to mess up the direction of all those hairs. And since I was already quite a few hours in by this point and I was pretty happy with it, I was also just sort of worried about messing it up in general, so I just kept putting it off. Actually, I did this burning over the course of a couple months, in and among some other things that I was working on. I think that I actually did the drawing for this about a year ago. So that's why the shirt I'm wearing changes at the end, because it's actually kind of funny. For the first little while, I was purposefully always wearing the same sweater to work on this piece, you know, for continuity and stuff. But then I sorta got expanding foam all over it at work, and I'm still working on getting it out of the sleeve, and it's on the inside because I had my sleeves rolled up at the time, so I can't really wear that sweater because it's a hard foam and it's very scratchy. So anyway, it felt to me like the mane took like 3 weeks, when it was really more like 2.5 hours. But that's still quite a while to be burning the same texture. All in all, this one took about 7 hours of burning, so no wonder my finger went a little yellow from the smoke. Actually no, I mean that was mostly from the background if I'm honest. There's really not any smoke when I'm burning at a lower temperature. But I am really pleased with how this turned out. It's a pretty ambitious project for me. I usually work a lot smaller, so I hope you like it too. here's a picture of the finished artwork. Please let me know what you think in the comments, and if you want to see more of my work, you can check out my Facebook page or follow me on Instagram. Also, please make sure to like this video if you haven't already, and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss all my future art videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.